team dynamics, groups. What are the good combinations, complementary skills, things like this. Now, obviously, the typical sort of theory would be that 6 co-founders is probably quite a crowd. So probably quite uncommon for every one of these categories to be in every successful founding team. What do good combinations look like? What are some of the key insights from the paper in with respect to teams?
Yeah, so I think your point about, firstly, the number of founders matter. Um, and I think this is also known by a lot of venture capitalists, investors in startups. More founders is good, and more founders raise more money and have more chances of success. So multi-founder companies are good. And our theory with that is that beyond just the advantage of having a greater network, and so that means that your product is more likely to be successful and you're more likely to have greater access to capital. Um, by virtue of having a larger team, you are going to have a larger personality footprint by definition. Doesn't matter who your founders are, it just means you're going to have more perspectives and more takes on the world. And so I think that the larger teams are better. There's obviously a trade-off between, um, what's workable and what's, like once it gets beyond 3, I can imagine it, the logistics of it become more difficult. But we have looked at various combinations of teams. So we looked at duo founded combinations of personalities as well as trio founded combinations. And we found firstly that the personality diversity, if you like, of the sum of those founders meant that they were much more likely to succeed. By the way, I should say that in this last piece so we're now looking at the last piece of the paper, we did some really fantastic multifactorial analysis. So our colleagues at Oxford, Fabian Braceman and Fabian Stephanie, did some brilliant work around looking at how do these um, how do these factors and features such as personality compare with other known influences on startup success. Um, and so yeah, so firstly, I guess the diversity matters, but then particular combinations are more successful than others. So 2 leaders and a developer we found to be 12 times more likely than other combinations. 2 developers and an operator, an engineer, a leader, and a developer. So you can see, people can dig into the paper and have a look at the detail themselves, but some of these combinations were up to 10 times more likely to be successful, these trio founded companies. And what's interesting here is one of these is the hacker, hipster, hustler, literally, and the other 2 have a combination of a hustler and a hacker. So this idea of having diverse teams with these different types of people, I think, provides much greater chances of success. And we went on to look at how that compares to other factors, as I said. So we looked at where the startups are based. Not surprisingly, where you're based makes a difference. If you're in California, you're more likely to be successful versus other parts of the world. Also, what industry you're in matters. Some startups are more successful than others, and also how long you've been around. So we adopted what's known as the Bonaventura definition of success. So it's a fairly strict definition of success, because I guess the question many listeners might have is, well, how do you define success? What's a
Mm,
successful startup?
yeah.
Um, in this case, we used um, have you IPO'd? So have you had a major liquidity event? Have you been acquired? Has there been a trade sale, or have you acquired another company yourself? So one of those 3 events. And I think by most people's definition, they would consider. We did look at fundraising metrics of success, but you can raise money and still not necessarily be successful. And I think these major liquidity event are better measures of success. And so I guess taking all these other factors into consideration, these other firm level factors like where you're based, what industry you are, and how long you've been around, we found that the combinations of personality within the startup at the beginning were much more significant and had a much greater
Mm.
impact on success.
Yeah, that's a really interesting kind of point to zoom into. So you've got these three kind of categorizations, if you put it, of your analysis: the firm level, the founder level, and the founder group, right? And
Yes, that's right.
and so essentially, you can be as close to the center of Silicon Valley as you like, but if you're the wrong team, it's not going to matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. Team trumps everything. I mean, that's my sense. And I think I had a sense of this. I mean, the starting point, we've called this the ensemble theory of startups because it takes into account lots of different perspectives. But I owe a debt of gratitude to a talk I saw many years ago by an Australian tech entrepreneur and investor, Lenny Mayo, who said basically that investors see the world in three different ways. And I've been quoting this, ever since. So I think, and it really lit a light bulb for me because I've been banging my head up against the wall previously with investors, from being an entrepreneur, pitching to them and sort of saying, especially in Australia, I think Australia has a particular interest around what I'd call the better mousetrap view of the world, the better mousetrap startup. And that's very product focused. So you've got to make the best product in the world. Doesn't matter who the team is, doesn't really matter what the industry is. If you come up with the best product, it's going to, and I think through historical circumstances, the fact that we invented Wi-Fi and the fact that we monetized that through suing other companies, and that was kind of seen as a great triumph. But there wasn't any great companies, unfortunately, built out of that. It was more a case of, this was a great mousetrap that was invented here and then was, obviously the world has benefited enormously from that invention. But from a startup sense, it was kind of like it's one way to do things is to be extremely protective about IP. And, I think there's understandable reasons for that in drug discovery. There's a lot of this sort of attitude where it's all about the IP, don't care about the team so much. Even the industry can come and go, if we've got the patent and we've got the kind of the key drug then. So that's the mousetrap view of the world. The other view of the world is the kind of the markets view of the world, which is more like the financial markets, which is all boats rise on the same tide.
Mm.
Today it's fintech, tomorrow it's AI,
Chasing
generative
alpha
AI,
almost.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And if it's some theme of yesterday, we're not interested. And to some extent, we don't even believe in individual companies or founders or anything. We just believe in the market. So it's almost like an index fund type view of the world.
Mm.
And I think to some extent, a lot of VCs, certainly movie producers work this way. There is this kind of herd mentality where things move in cycles and you have to have the movie about this, or you have to have your portfolio
Superhero
needs to
movies.
include these.
I'm
Exactly,
going to go mad
exactly.
if I see another
And then there's
superhero movie ad.
yeah, that's right. And now, and then there's a third view of the world, which is, I guess, that it's about the people, and I think, arguably, there's quite a few people at the top end of the VC business, I think, where they can afford to be selective, where they sort of say, well, you may have a great idea today, but it may not work, or or you may be in a hot market now, but it might go cold, but if you've got a good team, you'll be able to pivot. This idea of the pivots come around in the last few years, and without spending too much money, if you're sort of using a lean, sort of agile approach, as long as you've got the right team together, it's like the Rolling Stones model of startups. Keep the band together, and the rest will take care of itself. And I think to some extent, with a caveat, and the caveat would be, informed by this new research, if you have the right team, then I think you are in a really good position, and I think there is that opportunity to do some amazing things.